Hello and welcome to Streamers and Punches, the podcast from Sound Notion TV that looks at current events and new releases in the world of film music. My name is Bill Witham,
And I'm Kevin Wilt.
and on today's show, we'll kind of wrap up the end of the summer film scores, as well as look at a couple events, or rather award shows that have happened recently, and talk about some of the winners and look at what else is going on in the news. So first up, I want to just say, give a shout out to friend of the show, Jeff Beal, and congratulate him for winning. His Emmy was for the best. Let me make sure I get this right. Not just best theme, but best score for a dramatic series for House of Cards. So congratulations, Jeff Beal. And actually, I want to pause the Emmy thing there because there's another Jeff Beal related article that I'll let Kevin explain, and then we'll continue with the other Emmy winners. So, Kevin,
Sure.
if you can mention that.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago it was announced that Jeff and his wife Joan, I'm assuming it's his wife, I'm pretty sure it's his wife,
Yeah.
have committed $2 million to the Eastman School of Music to establish the Beal Institute for Film Music and Contemporary Media, which is kind of awesome. There are certainly a handful of film scoring programs at a couple different colleges and universities across the country. USC has one. I think UCLA has one. Berkeley College in Boston, of course, has one. Columbia College in Chicago has one. So there are a couple out there. And then several other universities have more general commercial music or music for media type programs out there. This one I think it's interesting not only because it's the establishment of a new film music program, but this is at one of the big music conservatories. This is one of the really big programs. Not to say USC in California is certainly fairly big, but I don't
But that's
know
in the
that,
heart of it. That's in
yeah.
the heart of the industry, so that makes sense there geographically.
Yeah, but that's obviously a really good school, but I don't know that we think of it necessarily on the same level as an Eastman or a Juilliard or an Indiana or something like that. So to have a film music program in such a well-established conservatory model institution is a really big deal. Obviously, there's a historical film connection to the Eastman School because, of course, Eastman is the same Eastman as Eastman Kodak, the actual film company, which clearly has a direct connection to the film industry.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think it's really interesting to see a program like this at such a big music school.
Yeah.
And it seems to be certainly part of a trend because I know lots and lots of people who teach composition, and I think this kind of extends past composition as well. But lots of people, and Bill and Dave, I'm sure you guys can sympathize. It's not unusual nowadays for students to come to music programs or music departments or composition faculty and say, I want to study to be a composer. I want to write for film or TV or video games. And I think we're kind of getting to a tipping point where, yes, most composition degrees are set up for people who want to, or really designed rather for people who want to write concert music and chamber music and orchestral music and things like that. But at some point you can't just ignore all of these people who want to write for media. At some point you've got to do something to create a place for them.
Yeah.
And this seems like it's the first place like that at such a substantial music school.
Mm-hmm. I remember
It
when
wouldn't be surprising to see a Juilliard or Indiana kind of follow suit. I know there's been a trend in the last couple of years at Yale. Not that they have a separate film scoring program, because I don't think they do, but there have been several younger film composers who've come out of Yale and done some pretty good projects, pretty sizable projects, So that at least seems to be a culture they're fostering there, even though they don't necessarily have a separate program.
Hmm. I remember reading about the various graduates that have come from Berkeley School,
Mm-hmm.
or is it officially the Berkeley School of Music? I can never
It's
remember.
Berkeley College.
Berkeley College in Boston.
Yeah.
So Michael Kamen, I believe, was one, and
Howard Shore came from there, I think.
that's right, that's right. And so they've had for quite a while, but also their college or their music program specifically always dealt with things more on the I hate the word popular because it's such a general or a generic term, but
Right.
kind of
But it's
more on the
definitely
popular
definitely
side.
things outside of the typical conservatory model.
Right, right. So it was a large enough establishment, but it kind of went, I thought, hand in hand with their musical mission in general. But yeah, for an Indiana university to get something like this, or a Rice or an Oberlin, that would be kind of interesting. And this is where it's starting. So, I don't, without sounding cynical, I would like to think that people are, like you said, with addressing the tipping point that teachers and perhaps even people that run programs are realizing that there's a lot of students that they could help. But there's a cynical part of me that's also like, it's just money. Like they want to say, we offer this so they'll get more students in the other school because they
Well,
are.
yeah, maybe. I mean, if you get that many students coming to you saying this is what I want to study,
I
how
mean,
many times can you say no, we don't do that
well,
before you start
sure.
realizing chairs are leaving empty, you know?
I mean, it could be like jazz was, say, 30 or 40 years ago, where
Right.
Indiana was actually one of the bigger holdouts for jazz. I mean, they have a program now, but they were not very quick to adopt it, and it was kind of the whole, well, we've got this Western European model, and it's working great for us, and we've got a big school, so we've got funds and we've got resources, so we don't really need to bring in this jazz music, and
Right.
then fortunately that ended, but this could be the next kind of frontier on, as far as that goes. But I also think that I'm not saying there's something bad about concert composition, but compared to what people who are now coming into college are used to, it's really slow for them. It's not something they can quickly do with technology and turn out, unless all they're doing is electronic music. You still have to sit down and actually write the music, and it just takes time to do it. And so I think sometimes they're looking for something that's like, well, not only does the actual craft take time, but then getting the conductor on board, going to the rehearsals, the model of it is very time consuming, and it seems to be sometimes at odds with our modern day lives, I suppose, but other times not so much. But I think sometimes when you work for media, you have very quick upcoming deadlines. You have a lot of technology that's there to help you get the job done quickly. That's not to say the quality of the music has been heightened, and in some cases it's been reduced greatly. But if we're talking a career, then it's about doing it, getting it done, and doing your job consistently. And if that's what people are wanting to do, then I think it would behoove some of the universities to kind of
Yeah.
acknowledge that and create a program that says, we'll incorporate maybe Western training alongside it, so it's
I
not
think
just
that's what you would hope. I think to me it seems like
yeah,
the
yeah,
healthiest thing, not only for students but for the field of film music, is for that to be a fairly permeable relationship. That
yeah,
the students studying, or the students composing concert music and the students composing music for media shouldn't be quarantined from
yeah,
each other. They're you
yeah.
know I mean, I think
Well, I
if
was
we look back, look back at just some of the. I'm not saying this always has to be the case because it's not. But if you look back at some of the people that are most highly regarded as film music composers, they also tend to be people with either a background or even some success in concert music as well.
yeah,
I think the separation of those things, which we've tend to see a little bit of in the last couple of decades, that compartmentalization of that is maybe not such a great thing. So hopefully that will not be the case here. I
mhm,
should also mention that in addition to the founding of this and the donation of this money, Jeff will be serving as the artistic director of this institute as well. So I'm sure I've full confidence that he will be pointing things in the right direction.
Yeah, yeah. So that's it's very cool, and congrats for them for beginning something that could be a really, really sort of fruitful venture. And yeah, we'll stay tuned. We'll pay attention to it and watch it and see how it flourishes and what goes on from there. So,
Yeah.
um, anyway, so I wanted to jump back to now listing the rest of the Emmy Award winners, if for no other reason, just to give a shout out to all these people that we have not yet had on our show. Starting with the Emmy winner for like most, I suppose all these always start with most outstanding music for, and then it's a different category. So the first category is limited series or a special, and that goes to Rachel Portman for her music for Bessie. And then the next category would be just best theme for a television show, and that goes to Dustin O'Halloran for Transparent, which is the Amazon show with
Jeffrey Tambor.
Jeffrey Tambor. Thank you. And then the Emmy for most outstanding music and lyrics go to Kyle Dunnigan for lyrics and Jim Roach for music for their work on Inside Amy Schumer. And then the final one is for music direction, and that goes to Greg Philanganis for his Stevie Wonder for his music direction during the Stevie Wonder Grammy Salute show. So congratulations to all those winners. Good work, awesome, and look forward to hearing what you come up with next year, I suppose. So now that we got the Emmys out of the way, we can just talk about Star Wars the rest of the time. That's okay with me. How about you, Kevin?
Sure.
Okay. All right. But you're going to have to contain that excitement. I mean...
I'll try and tone it down a little bit.
Okay. All right.
Can't
Appreciate that. All right. It's for the children, Okay. So speaking of Star Wars, I'll set you up for this. In the last couple of score releases, especially for prequels, they, in some cases, infamously would come out a couple weeks before the film would.
Yeah.
And Kevin, why was that good or bad?
I mean, it was great because we got to listen to that music earlier. It was sometimes
Definitely.
bad because you could read, track titles, which sometimes told you what the scene was that music accompanied. And if it was a couple of weeks or even half a week before you got to see the movie,
does Qui-Gon's noble end? Does that mean he dies?
Yeah. Wasn't there a track that was called like Qui-Gon's Funeral or something?
Well, there's Qui-Gon's noble end.
Okay. Yeah, that's not super subtle.
And and if there's ever a case for why can't John Williams just give Q track titles the same approach that Michael Giacchino does, where all you do is come up with these little smart aleck titles, like Hela Bartok in Star Trek instead of Bella Bartok or whatever.
Puns. That's true.
Yeah. But anyway, so that
I think, and Dave, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. This also seems to be. It's not an accident that this. So, I guess we should get to the point that you're trying to get to, Bill, which is the soundtrack for Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, will be released on December 18th, which happens to be the same day that the film comes out. It's not. This is not really an isolated case, I believe. And Dave,
the worldwide move. It is a worldwide move. It was a U.S. particular thing that records were released on Tuesdays, and they were released on different days throughout the world. But the problem is the internet, and people who had to wait until Friday didn't want to wait until Friday, and so they would just download things for free from places that you shouldn't go to download things for free. And the International Federation of the Phonographic Industry, IFPI, which is like the international version of the RIAA for those of you in the United States, they kind of oversaw this big negotiation. U.S. didn't want to move. Everybody else wanted the U.S. to move. And there were more places in the world that were on Fridays than anywhere else. And so everybody moved to Fridays for record releases.
Yes, I was going to say exactly all of those things.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I thought wasn't something set up for the 15th? Because I was looking at my calendar and the 15th is the Tuesday before that. But Has Star Wars? I guess Star Wars has always been the 18th, right? Ever
I
since all
think
the
so, yeah.
yeah.
This decision to release the soundtrack album on the Friday may have been relatively recent. The decision to shift release dates happened just this year, and the actual shift just happened in the last month or two.
Okay.
Right. No, the announcement of the release date for this album has been within the last maybe 3 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the 18th has been the movie release date this entire time. Is that correct?
so.
Or okay. I mean, I remember mid-December, but for some reason I got 15 in my mind and not 18. But either way, 18th it is for both features. And now, are you guys? Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but Tuesdays were always delivery dates, like you said.
Right.
Has that changed for everything, or is it just changing in this one instance?
No, I think that's what it's. I think it's changing for all music releases, right, Dave?
All music releases in the United States, and indeed likely the rest of the world, will move to Fridays. It was only a historical quirk that it was on Tuesdays in the U.S. to begin with.
I think comics are on Wednesdays, but that's neither
I
here
think
nor
comics
there.
have been on Wednesdays for a very, very long time. Yeah, I
Okay.
don't think that's changing. I don't know that.
Ah.
I think DVDs and Blu-rays also came out on Tuesdays. I don't think that's changing either. I think this is a completely separate thing.
I don't. Yeah, this is coming from IFPI, so I don't think it's going to affect anything other than music.
Yeah.
The only reason it was on Tuesdays, it used to be on Mondays actually, and the problem was the records were also delivered on Mondays, and so the stores that were earlier in the delivery route would get the more gung ho customers to go there, and that everybody decided that it wasn't fair to the arbitrary delivery route to decide what record stores succeeded and failed. And so everybody agreed, we'll keep the deliveries on Monday, and then everybody will open the boxes on Tuesday morning. So that's the only reason it's ever been on Tuesdays.
Well, I wondered if it had something to do with the weekend, since although people still
Could
drive
have been that they were driving trucks over the weekend and then delivering them to stores on Mondays.
on Monday. Okay, interesting. All right,
There you go. So anyway,
December
you can get
18th.
the album the same day that you can watch the movie. I'm imagining, because with all the prequel films,
They were released early.
Well, it wasn't that just that they were released early, but I remember they actually released, like, this was back in the days of like music videos and Total Request Live, which I guess I don't even know if that show still exists anymore.
Oh yeah,
But they
I remember
actually
that.
release for each of the films would release a single with a music video in advance of the actual album release. I imagine we'll probably get the 2015 equivalent of that. And I'm sure as we get closer, they will release.
Yeah.
Well, it seems for a lot of albums, for other films, even though they don't release the album, they release track titles a couple weeks in
Right.
advance.
Well,
Which sort of goes against what we were just talking about. But.
Exactly. That'll probably still happen, I'm guessing. All this sort of conjecture about how Abrams is just extending his controlling reach of the magical mystery box, or whatever you want to call it, where for those that don't know, his projects tend to be shrouded in mystery, so that the hope is that it's covering up a great reveal that you don't know until you see the show or a movie. And then the criticism is that often there isn't really a great thing at the core to reveal. It's just that they keep it shrouded in mystery. So that it's extending to things like the soundtrack, because the track titles could possibly give away plot points or plot devices or twists. And I think maybe because it's Star Wars and it's sort of a higher profile, I could see them maybe withholding some of the information. But almost all movies now that have any kind of notoriety for their musical score will release a couple tracks well before the movie comes out, because it's the exact same reason that Total Request Live would have a video of Duel of the Fates. It's hype for the movie, and you want to build up hype from any venue you can, be it interviews with the actors or releasing music early, or anything like that, or just extra movie trailers. So I think there'll be, and anyone just has to pay attention a little bit. I'm sure there's more than one Star Wars website out there created by fans that they'll be able to pick up on this. So. Yeah, and then we may have spoken about this in a previous episode, but William Ross, who is a Hollywood composer, conductor, orchestrator, he's kind of a man of all trades, and he's kind of in some ways a kind of akin to, say, Conrad Pope, who friend of the show, who we've talked to before. William Ross is listed as a conductor on episode 7. So that's kind of interesting, and it may be something to do with John Williams's health, or he could be recuperating, or it could just be to balance the work of what's going into this, because I know that they've had Williams kind of, I want to say on lockdown, but that's not the most flattering term for it, but I know he's been basically brought in to work on Star Wars, and they're keeping him from now until probably November-ish to work on the cues and then go through whatever changes need to be there, enough to where Spielberg could not work with him on Bridge of Spies and worked with Thomas Newman instead. So I can imagine there's certain things about the sessions that are probably fun, and I can imagine there's probably lots of things that are challenging and difficult to get through. And so we salute William Ross for stepping in and helping out, doing his part, and so I kind of think that's interesting. Kevin, I have a question for you.
Okay.
What do you're kind of you're kind of an expert on certain scores of John Williams, E.T. and things like that.
Expert's a strong word, but okay.
Well, you've done academic work on those scores, so I consider that more than man on the street. And
that's fair enough.
Right, and you've like me, you've listened to Williams' scores over the years, and you heard subtle changes in his style and things like that. And we may have spoken about this, but now that it's coming up, I'm curious if you have thought, I wonder what this Star Wars score will actually sound like, or will it sound similar to one of the prequels, or maybe even a different Williams score, or something along those lines, or have you even given it any thought?
I don't know that I can say that I have. Even though there were certain similarities in terms of style between the prequel scores and the original scores,
mm-hmm.
they're definitely different. I mean, they're 25 or so years apart from Return of the Jedi to Phantom Menace, and his style had changed a lot, or gone through at least a couple different phases over those few years. I don't know that I would say that his style has changed so much in the last 10 years since Episode 3 came out. I mean, if we think of the last couple of films he's done, so basically a couple Spielberg movies,
mm-hmm.
Did The Book Thief a couple years ago, and when I think back in the last few scores we've gotten from him, it kind of seems like they're all he's sort of settled into where he's going to be necessarily. Whereas like Catch Me If You Can or Minority Report or something was still pushing on a different boundary. I imagine this score will sound probably a lot like maybe the Revenge of the Sith or the prequel scores or something. I'm sure just like every other aspect of this film, they're pushing for kind of the nostalgia of the original films. So maybe that kind of finds its way in there by request. I don't know.
Yeah.
I get the sense that there is such a big push to connect this film with the style of the originals and not the prequel trilogy, that musically there will probably be some kind of aspect to that as well.
I wonder if, just exactly like what you just said, the idea of having the Star Wars world be very practical effects and not overabundance or over-reliance on CGI effects, in an effort to connect it to that kind of dirty, grungy Star Wars universe we had in the first three. I wonder if Abrams, because I kind of feel like he will extend that to the music and probably even reference cues from the first three. He could. I mean, maybe he'll say, "No, you know what? You're John Williams. You just work. You just do what you do because these are all new characters."
So from
You know?
from what I've read, when the couple of comments that Abrams has made about the music, that's exactly what he said. He basically just said to John Williams, "Hey, go do your thing. I'm going to stay out of your way." And then he said he's liked what he's heard. That doesn't mean that during some of the recording sessions he can't kind of poke a little further.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think what you said is probably very accurate.
I was talking to another friend who's knowledgeable because I do have other friends besides you, Kevin. But I was speaking to another friend that's very knowledgeable of Williams' scores over the years, and he felt that I was probably going to sound a little bit like Tintin. And I thought, okay.
Yeah.
That's not
there's
too.
Something about the Tintin score. I really like the Tintin score, but there is something about it that it's almost like John Williams in 2012 or whenever that movie came out. It's almost like John Williams doing an impression of 80s John Williams.
Yeah.
Which in a very very subtle way, because he is a different composer than he was 30 years ago. And it's tough to artistically backtrack is not a friendly way of saying it, but
or just revisit it is tough an older sound.
Yeah, just to go back without there being any change. So yeah, I can see that. Think that this will sound kind of like a Tintin score, maybe in that particular similarity, in that it will sound like John Williams trying to sound like John Williams.
Yeah, well, I think he'll definitely check, several of the themes that are familiar. So it will just by default it'll recall earlier Star Wars scores, and I think he'll have a pretty good gallery of new themes for all these characters. So I think it'll kind of establish its own legs as well. And I'm looking forward to it overall. I think it'll be fun, and I've noticed he's always capable, or has anyway in the past, created really fun scores that are memorable and colorful and just really just add all the support to the film and yet have something about them that's fun on their own when the movie itself kind of invigorates him. And so sometimes there'll be a Spielberg movie that's not the best Spielberg's ever done, or once the Star Wars prequels go to the second and then to the third one, I noticed that there's a decline in that kind of vitality or that kind of excitement and color and energy to the scores. But I always thought Phantom Menace was just like an explosion of like, oh, I'm so glad to be back writing this fun Star Wars music for the orchestra, for the fans and the audience to listen to, and it feels like that excitement could be present for The Force Awakens as well.
Do you think that has as much to do with his excitement? I mean, that movie was just happened to be kind of a brighter, happier movie than the two movies that followed it. Also, I think us as an audience, we were more excited for that too.
Mm-hmm. It could be any combination of those things, and the truth may be somewhere in the middle. But I do think from his, he had a certain nostalgia for it, that when he came back to it, they're working in London, and all the musicians on the breaks are coming up and saying, hey, when I was a kid, I listened to the London Symphony play Star Wars, and that made me want to go to school and play cello. So he's getting this kind of like energy, sort of this return good karma thing going on, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, so there's something more here than it's just not just another job. I just don't think it's another scoring gig, and I think he's very well aware that he's lucky, and he said he's a very lucky guy to be able to do not one but two Star Wars trilogies. And so I just kind of felt like, what would anybody do when they have talent and they return to something like a franchise like that? I think they would start with just they'd have a lot of themes, they'd have a lot of energy, a lot of creativity as they come back to this world, and that is if they liked it. But from interviews, he seems to speak fondly of those years scoring the originals, and so I think he returned with that. but at least the way I read it, now I could be wrong, but I just don't think after everyone saw the first one and then let it settle in, then they were kind of like, it's not very good. And then the second and the third one were like, now I'm really upset. And then the third one's like, just get it over with. And I kind of felt like the musical scores kind of went along with that, but that could just be me making an association there. That may not really be. It may be more subtextual or subconscious. But anyway, yeah, we'll see.
Let's talk about some music that we've actually listened to.
I know,
is
right?
Actually been recorded and is available.
Yeah, we could definitely do that. What have you been listening to lately, Kevin?
The last couple of things I've seen in the theaters, maybe about a month ago, I saw The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Okay.
With music by Daniel Pemberton, which was fun. The movie was kind of okay. The actors were sort of all right. The music itself was actually pretty fun. And it's interesting listening to that score. How it in some ways kind of changed my perspective a little bit on music from the era that score was trying to emulate.
Yeah, in what way?
So Man from U.N.C.L.E. is set in like, I guess maybe the mid '60s. I don't remember the exact year it's set in, and it has very much kind of an early Mod Squad kind of thing. And the music stylistically very, very much harkens back to the music from that original TV show and that particular time period.
Yeah.
For me, there was not too much later than the time of that original show. I think I want to say it's like 1968 or 69 or something. There was a film version of Casino Royale, which is the first James Bond book. But the film Casino Royale in the late 60s was basically a James Bond parody, where you had David Niven played James Bond, but he was retired.
And this was after Dr. No had come out, right?
This was after the first couple of Bond films, I think.
Right. Okay, so Sean Connery is the only Bond at this point.
Right. And 1967. So this would have been after a couple of the Sean Connery Bond films. I think maybe before On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which was the George Lazenby. So anyway, this film was a parody. David Niven plays James Bond, and he's retired, but the British Secret Service, there's so much international fear and weight behind the name James Bond. They don't want the rest of the world to realize that he's retired, so they start using James Bond as a code name. And so there are all sorts of different actors that are on screen in this movie with the code name James Bond, including like Peter Sellers and Woody Allen and all sorts of people. It's a really goofy, weird, pretty terrible movie. But the music was by Burt Bacharach, and it's this just kind of not trippy, but just this strange fusion of things from the mid '60s. And Bill, you might remember a couple years ago on Saturday Night Live there was a skit with Will Forte where he plays like a basketball coach bringing his team into the locker room at halftime, and they're getting crushed, and so he's got to give them the big pep talk. And he talks about this piece of music that his coach used to play, and they went out, they listened to this music at halftime, and they went out and they won the championship and all this kind of stuff. And he plays one of the tracks of this Burt Bacharach score. And of course it's very funny because it's just this really goofy, silly, like incredibly like white dude kind of music. And Will Forte starts dancing to it, and it's really goofy. And I think Peyton Manning was the host of that episode, and he's one of the basketball players, so he gets up and he starts dancing. And it's just really, really silly. And even though I have like recording of that score from Casino Royale, I would always listen to it with like this sense of, oh my God, isn't this awful? Isn't this just how terrible is this music? It's so ridiculous. And after watching Man from U.N.C.L.E. and listening to music that's trying to emulate that time period, I could go back to that Burt Bacharach score and really start to listen into it where I was thinking like, okay, you know what? I can kind of hear how, in a strange way, this is actually kind of cool. And so it's I don't know,
Yeah.
listening to that score from Man from U.N.C.L.E. it kind of
It
gave
kind
me
of
a different
triggered all that.
perspective on some music from that era, I guess.
Well, to answer your first question, no, I don't remember that skit from Saturday Night Live.
You should check it out. Okay.
Okay. All right. So, but I'll go with it on faith. I'll trust you and your description of
Yes.
it. And no doubt Will Forte's wonderful performance that's in there, I'm sure. Um, I picked up the soundtrack because I really enjoyed not only like we talked about last time Joe Kramer's score to Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, but when I saw the movie, I was with a good buddy of mine, and we had a lot of disagreements about the movie. I thought the acting feels just off, like it's really it's stiff. I don't know what the right word is. It's just not working for me, and something about the cast or the plot or the movie or everything it does not in the whole first act. It just doesn't quite
There had been a
gel.
lot. There had been a lot written that those two actors were not the first, or maybe even like third or fourth choices for the leads.
Yikes.
I can totally believe that. I guess initially, the lead character played by Henry Cavill was the original discussions were either George Clooney or Tom Cruise.
And Tom Cruise would have been too double dipping, too much of that.
Maybe.
Well, I mean, yeah, I know that Ethan Hunt, his Mission Impossible character, is not the same as Napoleon Solo, but it would have been too many. I think one too many spy franchises. Although it doesn't bother the comic book.
How many teams of spies can you lead in a movie?
Yeah, but the entire time I watched the film, I was kind of like, everyone's dressed really nice, everyone's pretty, but the music, I was like, wow, the music is mixed into this film really well. There's a lot of solos, like especially when you actually can listen to the album and enjoy it just for what it is. The guy who plays either it's alto flute or I think it's alto, and he's doing that kind of like fast double tonguing, but there's a breathy kind of like he's vocalizing underneath all the double tonguing. So you just get this really cool like flute machine gun sound, and it's used really, really well in several cues. And there's a little paragraph in there where Pemberton wrote about how there was certain challenges, like having to make that flute player play that solo more than once was one of the challenges. But curiously, he thanks the several people that Pemberton thanks. He says, and I want to thank all the previous composers of the television show, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Now, I'm not saying I spent a whole Friday night doing research on The Man from U.N.C.L.E., but after I saw the movie, I noticed in the end credits that it said it included the theme from the television show, which is by Jerry Goldsmith. And I'm familiar with the theme, but I remember watching the movie and I was like, I didn't hear it, or maybe I was so busy trying to diagnose like what is not working about this movie for me. But I never heard it, and then when I bought the score, it's not on the score anywhere, and he never acknowledges Goldsmith by name. But when I just went to YouTube and started listening, there are several different versions of the main title, but they're all the exact same main title music. That's just tweaked, or now it's big band, and now it's more like trumpet and flute and guitar. I mean, it goes through different instrumental versions, but it's always the same theme, and it's always by Jerry Goldsmith. So that was kind of a curiosity to me, but anyway, it's just, But it is a lot of fun to listen to, and the ensemble, it's very curiously orchestrated, or not curiously orchestrated.
It is kind of a bizarre combination of things. You say, okay, let's put flugelhorn and alto flute and harpsichord. Like on paper, that sounds like it should be really weird.
Well, I'll read it off to you.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. We got here are the credits. Featured musicians. So a guy named Dave Heath plays multiple flutes. You got 3 different guitarists, 2 drummers, 2 bass players, 4 percussionists. There is basically a Hungarian dulcimer that's used in a lot of film scores called, depending on how you like to pronounce it, either a cymbalum or a cimbalum. Either way, there are 2 players. I'm sorry, 1 player for that, 2 harpsichord players, a Hammond player, one person that plays multiple recorders, a harmonica harmonica, uh, something called a marxophone, which I've never heard of that. Okay, so there's a marxophone and a univox, and that's played both by Daniel Pemberton. Hand claps is credited to a person. There's a trumpet soloist and two vocalists, and then a conductor, and then it just says strings and brass, the Chamber Orchestra of London. So if there was trombones, then that was part of the Chamber Orchestra of London.
Mm-hmm.
But it gives first credit or first billing to all those soloists. So just a really cool score, and in a lot of ways, kind of a nice mirror to Rogue Nation. So that was Joe Kramer saying, I want to only write for what was available to Lalo Schifrin in the 60s. But yeah, there's many moments where there's solos, but it's also really utilizes the large ensemble really, really effectively. And this was almost the reverse of that, where it's the same time period, and in many ways, some of the same approach to acoustic, to favor acoustic over, say, like electronics, or like what Joe Kramer said, I'm going to leave out drum kit and electric guitars, because Lalo didn't have that. This is sort of like adding a few things that probably the original guys, Goldsmith included, probably did not have, but add some kind of extra flavor. So I don't think a cymbalom was in the original TV show, but it's pretty cool in this score. So it gets my stamp of approval.
There you go.
Yeah. How about anything else you've checked out, Kevin?
Yeah, another movie I saw just a couple weeks ago, kind of an under-the-radar film a little bit. It's called No Escape, with music by Marco Beltrami and Buck Sanders. This was a movie starring Owen Wilson, and
James
Lake
Bond.
Bell,
and James Bond.
And James Bond, Pierce Brosnan, who is always a favorite of mine. I've noticed he, especially since his James Bond days have been over, has done some not so good films. And you know what? I'll kind of go see them anyway. I don't care, because he's Pierce Brosnan, and that's I don't care.
Okay. Everyone's allowed their one-man crush.
Well, yeah.
Or James Bond crush.
He's certainly on my list. But there's not a ton I can say about the score necessarily. The film was pretty gritty and intense. The score definitely matched that.
I remember seeing the trailer, and I thought, are they running from zombies? Is this like a World War Z copy movie? And then they're not.
It's basically a zombie movie, except it's kind of racist, because they're not running from zombies. They're running from like generic East Asian people from an East Asian country that isn't even named. So they're basically there's this huge riot in this country that these people are visiting, and all of the natives, if you will, are just completely nameless and faceless. So it's basically a zombie movie. None of them remotely approach being an actual character. So there's actually been a lot of criticism of this film for being like a good film, but pretty racist.
Like instead of
a
a
bad way of
zombie
describing the film.
Instead of a zombie apocalypse, it's like a political refugee apocalypse.
Yes, basically.
Okay. But that's the thing. They don't show them in the trailer. They just show that they're running from something and they're on these rooftops, and the next biggest cliffhanger is, can they all jump from one building to the other building?
Right.
And then I'm kind of like, could we see what the threat is? That would at least entice me a little bit. And then when I found out that it's sort of basically a lot of people there's a lynch mob or something along those lines.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, but they're in a foreign country. Then I thought, well, this just sounds like kind of like a CNN story that we have those in the news. So I don't know why I'd want to see a dramatization of that.
It has just as much substance as a zombie movie. Like there's not really much motivation behind the mob other than
yeah, let's destroy.
Basically, the whole movie is, are the white people going to be okay? That's kind of the whole movie.
Yeah.
A couple of the reviews I'd read, and I think the score kind of fits in with this, is from the standpoint of like an action movie, like the fights and the quick cutting and all that kind of stuff, it's actually really well done. It's just too bad the story wasn't better. And so in that sense, the score services the movie in a way that you would hope that a score would service a solid action movie.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. I haven't seen anything else, so well, like I said, we're just kind of clearing out the rest of summer, and then we'll gear up.
Uncle, although it was not hugely successful, was kind of the last big summer movie release. Last big summer action movie, anyway, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And so now we'll just kind of regroup, and I think we can save it for our next episode of what kind of fall and going into the winter, what kind of movies we'll be looking forward to. There will be some good ones.
Next couple of weeks, next month or so, we start getting into award season kind of stuff. So I know, I think October sometime in October, we get Bridge of Spies. So that'll be really interesting to hear, a score for a Spielberg film that isn't John Williams. That'll be
and the word on the street is that it's very good, and that it works great in the film, but it's wonderful music as well. So I'm looking forward to it. Very interesting. And nothing against, hey, I'm glad John didn't do that one. It's like, no, but when something doesn't work out, and then you get a great film composer like Thomas Newman, and he works with Steven Spielberg, I just love those like unexpected mashups of talent.
Yeah.
So really,
I don't know that there was ever any risk that you're going to get a bad score in a Steven Spielberg film,
right?
Because I think you'd have a hard time naming a director out there who knows more about film music than Steven Spielberg.
Yeah.
I mean, something's not working or something needs a tweak. He is well versed enough in music and in orchestration where he'll say, "Oh, this should be that, or maybe we should do this." Whereas most directors can't talk about music on that level.
Yeah.
He can. So. Yeah.
Yeah. Just real quick, I'll add. Oh, sorry. Would you guys say something else?
No, that was it.
Okay. In the new releases area, The Secret of Nem, an animated film from 1982 that Jerry Goldsmith scored, had recently had an expanded reissue, sort of expansion and remastering of it. So that's out if you want to get that. And everything else recently that I've named is there was kind of like a big onslaught of new recordings in the last podcast. So that hasn't changed too much, and there's not that much out right now. But that's pretty recent. Check that out if you're interested. And that's going to do it. Let's see. So, let's see, Kevin, anything else?
No, I think that's it. That's all I got.
Okay. All right. That'll do it for this episode of Streamers and Punches. You can listen to us on soundnotion.tv/SAP, where you can subscribe to our show, leave comments, and find links to the music we spoke about. You can also subscribe to the show through iTunes. My name is Bill Witham.
And I'm Kevin Wilt.
Thank you for listening.